Welcome to Seed Savers Session 2, Seed Harvest and Processing. Resources used in creating this presentation include Michigan State University Extension, Organic Seed Alliance, and the Seed Savers Exchange. In the first video, we learned that there are many reasons why you should become a seed saver. The wonderful thing is that anyone can do it and it is free. And you'll be helping with food stability in our local community. We discussed types of seeds, and remember that you want to make sure the plants you are growing are from open pollinated or heirloom seeds. Avoid hybrids for seed saving. We learned the importance to know how a plant pollinates before you harvest seeds from it. The self-pollinating, perfect flower plants are the easiest for harvesting true to type seeds. Some examples of these inbreeding plants are lettuce, peas, beans, and wheat. Strong outbreeding plants include beets, broccoli, corn, and spinach. These plants need cross-fertilization to reproduce. So you need to ensure that the pollen that the flower is receiving is from the same variety. This will result in true to type seeds, meaning the seeds will have the characteristics like its parent. To help Mother Nature give us true to type seeds, you can isolate your crop by time, by space, or by barriers. Population size of crops should be larger for cross-pollinating plants, and it can be smaller for self-pollinating plants. And the last point to remember is that it is extremely important to label. Label when you plant, label when you harvest, and label when you store the seeds. The label should have the species and the variety. Instead of just saying tomato, you should include the variety of tomato. In this video, I use the example brandy wine in the first video. When harvesting seeds, consider the crop. Beans, peas, corn, cabbage, and lettuce are dry seed crops. The seeds will be found in seed heads or pods that are usually dried in place on the plant. So you just leave the plant grow and let them dry. The three types pictured here, starting at the far left, are lettuce seed heads. In the middle are marigold seed heads. And then the little pods are daikon radish. Tomatoes, squash, and cucumbers are a few examples of wet seed crops. The seed is concealed inside the flesh of the fruits. Pictured here is a cucumber past its eating stage, and in the straw hat are gooseberries. Depending on the variety of pepper, they can be classified as a dry or a wet seed crop. Which is easier to harvest, a dry crop seed or a wet crop seed? That depends who you ask. The process for both of these seeds require different methods of harvesting and processing. These methods will be explained in the next few slides, and then you can decide which you think is easier. When harvesting dry seed crops like beans, peas, lettuce, corn, broccoli, onion, or cabbage, make sure the pods or seed heads are good and dry. One way to check the dryness with a seed head is to roll it between your fingers or hands. And if the seeds are easily released, it's dry. If it's a pod or husk, it should crack open with some pressure, like squeezing it between your fingers, stomping on it, or hitting it with a flat object. In adding this force, the seed should readily fall out. Pictured, starting at the left, are two seed heads, cutleaf coneflower and yarrow. The third bottom picture are pods from dragon tongue beans. Notice that I put some beans to the side. They were rather flat and small, so they will be composted with the bean shells. Remember that we want to save the best. These little guys, they didn't make the cut. Another method I figured out before reading about it is collecting seeds by laying a sheet of cloth under the plant. Pictured here is a borage plant. Pollinators love it, and it has an edible flower with a cucumber taste. I was trying to gather borage seeds, but the seeds would ripen and fall in the soil before I could hand pick them off the plant. I laid a piece of white row cover under the plant to catch the seeds, and it worked wonderfully. I'll mention one last way to gather seeds, and it is to tie a paper bag around the seeds you want to gather. This works best with seed heads like lettuce that have a seed with that feathery pappus. When watching for seed maturity, pay attention to the color of the seed pods and seed heads. Maturity can be indicated by a change of color turning to a darker yellow, brown, or black. There are two ways to harvest. You can harvest slowly and select pods and heads as they dry, or you can harvest all at once. The rule of thumb for harvesting all at once is to wait until 60 to 80% of the crop has mature seeds. Sometimes weather conditions will prompt you to harvest earlier than you were planning. The goal is to dry your harvest on the plants, but if there is going to be a prolonged rain period, it might be best to cut off or pull out your plants, bundle them, and hang them in a space that would allow them to continue to dry. And remember, you want to harvest and save the best of your crop to improve your seed stock. When your crop is dry enough, it is time to separate the seed from the non-seed material. This material of leaves, stems, and pods is called the chaff. First, you start with threshing, which is releasing the seeds from the rest of the plant material attached to the seed head or pod. Common methods for backyard gardeners would be hand rubbing, stomping, or banging seed stalks inside a container. Once you have the seeds loosened, it is time to winnow. The usual method to winnow is wind. Depending on the weight of your seed, wind can be you blowing lightly over the seeds in a bowl. It can be an outside breeze, or it can be a fan blowing the chaff away. Here is where the art of seed saving comes in, knowing how much wind is needed to blow chaff and not the seed. It's tricky. At least that's been my experience. The last step in the cleaning process is to sift seeds through strainers. Having a variety of different size screens is helpful. To remove the larger pieces of debris in your seeds, select a screen big enough for your seed to fit through. To remove the smaller pieces, select a screen just large enough to catch the seeds and let any small debris sift out. Screens, especially made for seed savers, can be purchased. Some people make their own, or you can collect different size kitchen strainers. Wet seeds are harvested quite differently. With harvesting seeds from cucumbers and tomatoes, select crops that are fully mature, meaning very ripe. This yellow cucumber shows how different a ripe cucumber looks compared to the green unripe cucumber pictured next to it. To remove the seeds, slice the fruit in half and scrape the seeds and pulp into a container with some water. The fermentation process is where seeds are left for 2 to 3 days in a warm location, and it loosens the pulpy residue. It'll remove a germination inhibiting gel, and it helps to destroy diseases. A small amount of white mold may start to grow, but it can be stirred back into the pulpy water mixture. A sign that the fermentation process is complete is when the gel around the seeds is completely separated from the seeds. Then it's time to decant. Pour off the water and sludgy mixture, leaving the seeds on the bottom. Any seeds floating are considered not viable, so freely let these go when decanting. Rinse the seeds, strain, and set out to dry. You can set your seeds on paper plates, coffee filters, sheet pans, or plywood. Guess what I'm going to say next? Yep, remember to label your seeds in the drying stage. Crops like melon, squash, and eggplant are considered wet seed crops. However, my resources stated that they do not need to go through the fermentation process. Simply cut them in half, scoop out the seeds, separate the pulp, rinse, and dry for a few weeks. Whether your harvest contains dry seeds or wet seeds, they all need to be promptly dried. This is for a few reasons. If the seeds are left in a moist condition, they could break dormancy and start to grow. Also, damp conditions can promote mold growth on them. The use of screens, cardboard box lids, newspaper, paper plates, coffee filters, they all make appropriate containers to allow your seeds to fully dry. Maximize airflow and separate the seeds out in a thin layer. Allowing airflow under the container is a good idea. If you are drying seeds and the conditions are humid, the use of a dehumidifier will help. Seeds can become damaged at high temperatures, so it is not recommended to dry them in direct sunlight, in a dehydrator, oven, or microwave. A good rule to go by is when you think your seeds are dry, leave them out one more week to dry. At this point, a lot of effort and time has gone into saving seeds. We want to make sure the seeds we gathered are properly stored to have viable seeds in the spring. Two easy words to remember: cool and dry. By keeping your seeds cool and dry, it will slow down the rate at which the embryo uses its food. Another reason for cool and dry conditions is that a seed is less vulnerable to be attacked by bacteria and fungi. Insects and rodents find seeds to be an excellent source of nourishment. Selecting a safe place is important. Seeds can be stored in thick plastic, glass, or metal, but make sure your seeds are to the level of very dry. The next slide will explain how to test to know if your seeds are very dry. If insects and rodents are not a concern, paper envelopes and brown paper bags are all good options for seed storage. In the photo are some recycling ideas: junk mail envelopes and origami with seed catalog pages. There are different ways to test your seeds for dryness. The first is a check on brittleness. There are two methods to check the brittleness of your seeds. The test for small oblong seeds or thin ones is to bend them. If they are dry, they will snap instead of bend. For bigger seeds like corn, peas, and beans, put them on a surface and hit them with a hammer. If they are dry, they will shatter and not smash or mush. The diagram in the top right corner compares pumpkin seeds after they have been hit with a hammer and when they have gone through the bending test. In the top row, the seeds were air dried. I'll discuss the bottom row there in a second. The second way to check for dryness of seeds is called the envelope test. You don't actually have to use an envelope, as most any paper will do. Put one piece of paper in your package of seeds overnight and leave one piece of paper sitting out. The next day, compare the paper in the bag to the paper that was sitting out. If the paper from inside the bag feels moist or it is not as crisp as the paper that is sat out, then you will want to keep drying the seeds. The third way is to push your fingernail into the seed. If your nail leaves a good sized dent, then the seeds probably need more drying time. The last way, the most accurate test for dryness, is to determine the percentage of moisture in the seed. To do this, select a sample of seeds and weigh them. Next, take this sample and slowly dry it in an oven on low heat until all the moisture is removed. To check to see if all the moisture is removed, periodically weigh the oven-dried seeds. Keep drying until the weight stabilizes. The formula to determine the percentage of moisture is fresh seed weight minus dry seed weight divided by dry seed weight, and then times this by 100. An experiment pictured here was done with pumpkin seeds. Now back to the brittleness test on the bottom row there, the pumpkin seeds. These are seeds that were slowly dried in an oven until all the moisture was removed. Remember that this is not a good seed saving technique, but this was done to test moisture content. Notice the shattered pieces when hit with a hammer and how different they look. In general, very dry for small seeds is 5% seed moisture content. And for large seeds, it's 7%. That is why for the amateur seed saver, it is recommended to use paper envelopes or paper bags for seed storage. We may think our seeds are very dry, which I thought my pumpkin seeds were, but actually the test showed they contained 12% moisture. If I was storing these seeds in tightly sealed containers, I may have ended up with a moisture problem. If this is seemingly a bit overwhelming, rest assured that we are all learning this together. People have been saving seeds for hundreds of years, and they did not have access to internet to learn how to do it properly. It's wonderful that we have a large community of people who are interested and willing to plunge into seed saving. We can support one another on our journey. Do not let all this information intimidate you. As the growing season starts, we will offer hands-on opportunities for you to partake in seed saving events, and this will all start to make more sense. Thank you for completing session 2 of seed saving. There will be one more training video in this series. In closing, here is an encouraging quote written by Janice Ray. I want to tell you about the most hopeful thing in the world. It is a seed. I hope you will become a Brown County seed steward to be part of the most hopeful thing in the world.